Today in our Death Culture Around the World series, we're heading to Greenland. Why, you ask? Well, I was watching a David Attenborough doco recently and realised just how rarely we actually ever hear about the place. And as it turns out, it's often not included on world statistics and all those random lists that you see come up. But before we begin, we post death and dying related videos every Friday. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, consider subscribing to the channel. Now let's talk death culture in Greenland. First up, some stats and facts about the country. First up, let's put it on the map. Greenland is actually massive and it's located northeast of Canada, or northwest of Europe, depending on how you look at it. The main island of Greenland has an area of 2,130,800 square kilometres, which makes it the world's largest island. Politically, Greenland is an autonomous territory of the Kingdom of Denmark. Greenland has a population of just 57,000 people, so not many. For reference, because understanding the population size will come in handy for later, Canberra, Australia's capital, has a population 8 times higher than that of all of Greenland. And just to compare it with something completely ridiculous, New York City's population is 137 times higher. So yeah, teeny tiny. 88% of that population is Greenlandic Inuit, 70% are Danish, and 5% are everything else. Men live to the age of around 69 years old on average, and women to around 74 years. Evangelical Lutheranism is the major religion with an estimated 85% of the population, depending on who you ask. Rather depressingly, traditional Inuit beliefs, including shamanism, is only claimed by less than 1%. With that, let's get on to the death part. Traditional Inuit beliefs. So for clarity, and because I didn't know this before, the Inuit people as a whole are the indigenous people to the Arctic region, including Canada, Alaska, Greenland, and Russia. They are not the same people as the Sami of Scandinavia and the First Nation Canadians. So for the Greenlandic Inuit, when a death occurred, the inhabitants of the settlement, primarily close relatives, fell under various taboos. The soul would live on in the afterworld, either in the sky, which resembled the inland with the possibilities of caribou hunting, and in the underworld, where the dead hunted marine animals. And it was the way of dying that decided on where you would go. Women who died giving birth and those who died at sea went to the lower world, where they preferred. The name of the dead was taboo to say openly until a newborn child was named after him or her. Such renaming is still common in Greenland. The Greenlandic Inuit also believe that the dead may become ghosts as well. Ghosts made themselves known either by whistling or singing close to someone's ear. Moreover, they were usually hungry souls of the departed, but they were not malicious. Ghosts of parents sometimes became guardian spirits protecting their children. Therefore, in many cases, children and grandchildren were named after their deceased relative, hoping that the deceased would protect them. Burial. Nowadays, with the prevalent Lutheran religion, a funeral in Greenland follows the usual church-like activities, so we won't bother going into that. However, we will go into burial. Yes, they prefer burial in a country where the ground is frozen the vast majority of the time. But there are a few different ways to go about this. In Kulashok Cemetery, being only 65 miles away from the Arctic Circle, the cemetery is located upon permafrost ground, meaning that for most of the year, no new graves can be added. Greenland does, however, experience endless daylight in the summertime, with the sun never setting between the days of May 25th and July 25th. During this time, the temperature finally reaches above freezing and new graves can be buried. Now, storing all these bodies and burying them in a 2-month period may sound chaotic, but remember the small population size of the country. And despite its small population, Greenland does have a number of cemeteries throughout the country. And this is very necessary because with only 2 months of a year with sunlight, those bodies are not decomposing anytime soon. Now you probably noticed in these photos, all these cross-marked graves look the same and bear no names of those buried beneath. The lack of name is tradition that honours the local Inuit legend, where it is believed that people should be buried in unnamed graves so as to not confuse the spirits in the afterlife. In this tradition, the soul of the deceased may return to Earth and continue living through another body for the next generation, which is unwanted. Another type of burial in Greenland is above ground burial. This is more likely the further north you go, where you are away from the main towns and traditional Inuit culture is more prevalent and there's less sunlight to thaw everything out. Meaning, you get cemeteries that look like this, which is pretty cool, huh? As you can see, stone and cement coffins are placed above ground as the glacial rock is too hard to bury into. Often, these coffins face the ocean so the dead can view the sea for the rest of eternity. The sad statistic. Unfortunately, we can't make a video about death in Greenland without mentioning the suicide epidemic over there. And frustratingly, its suicide rate by percentage is much higher than anywhere else, yet it never appears on any of those top 10 lists you see. This is partly because Greenland statistics are rolled into Denmark statistics, as Greenland is an autonomous part of Denmark. So for the past 40 years, the average suicide rate in Greenland per year is 96 suicides per 100,000 people. But remember, Greenland doesn't even have 100,000 people. For reference, depending on who you ask, Lesotho in Africa is said to have the highest rate at 72.4 per 100,000, and a bit further down is South Korea at 28.6 per 100,000. So yeah, Greenland is doing very badly. But think about it. We know that in most parts of the world, Indigenous people have a massive suicide epidemic going on. We know that. But for statistics, they are often a very tiny proportion of the population, so that high statistic gets lost amongst the larger population. For instance, in Australia, Indigenous people only make up 3.8% of the population. In Canada, it's 5%. In US, 2%. New Zealand, 16.5%. But Greenland is unique in that the majority, 88% of the population, are Indigenous people, so that suicide stat is blindingly obvious. The other unfortunate thing that they have in common is suicide clusters, where in a small community, one person's suicide seems to set off a chain reaction of others. And you can imagine what happens to a small community when you have that many deaths in a short period of time. And Greenland's population, while spread out, is very small, so everyone knows someone who has taken their own life. And research is finally starting to be done about this issue in Greenland, and while researchers were hoping the explanation would be all the long dark days, it has come as a shock to absolutely no one that the real reason is the same as everywhere else: the intentional and unintentional consequences of colonization. Fun facts. Now, I'm not going to leave you on such a sad note, so let's look at some fun facts about the country. Greenland got its name as a promotional stunt. If Greenland is covered in ice, why is it called Greenland? Well, it's said that exiled Viking Eric the Red came up with the name as a marketing ploy to encourage others to follow him to Greenland and establish new settlements there. And it kind of worked. The Inuit name for Greenland means land of the people. Although we know the country as Greenland, the original people called their land this. Nowadays, Greenlanders have adopted the name, which means country of the Greenlanders. There are more boats than cars in Greenland. The ocean and the fjords provide the most extensive highway system in Greenland, which is why more Greenlanders have boats than cars. In many of the small settlements, you will not see a single car, but you will see plenty of boats tied up on the shoreline. Traditional Greenlandic food is based on hunting and fishing. Hunting season is eagerly awaited by Greenlanders and will include whale, seal, fish and seaweed, musk ox, and reindeer or caribou. These are prepared for long-term storage and enjoyed regularly. Modern Greenlandic food uses traditional main ingredients fused with flavours and techniques introduced by chefs from around the world. It is not unusual to see a reindeer burger on the menu or a whale Thai red curry, which actually sounds pretty damn good. So that's Greenland, certainly high on my list of places to visit, although I'm not sure how my dodgy knee will go in the cold. Where should we go next? Let us know in the comments. And with that, go talk death.